Hi everyone, I am Lyndsay Greene. I am the dining critic at the Detroit Free Press. Can everybody hear me okay? Can you hear me? Okay. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me. I'll tell you a little bit about me before we jump into introductions. Again, I'm at the Free Press. I'm actually a New York native, so this conversation, I'm not originally from Detroit, but coming from another city and being here in Detroit is relevant to me a little bit. I'll let everybody introduce themselves. I've got a great roster of people here with me in the restaurant industry, so I'll start with you, Mamba.
Yeah, my name is Mamba Hassimi. I'm the co-owner and co-founder of Baobab, East African restaurants created here in Detroit.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Ederique. You can just call me E. And I'm the founder of In the Business of Food, which is a consulting agency specifically for food entrepreneurs and those looking to start food businesses.
My name is Gadbow. I am the chef and owner of Oak and Reel Restaurant here in Milwaukee Junction, Detroit.
And my name is Anthony Lombardo. I'm the chef owner of SheWolf, Pastificio and Bar, and it's right down the street in Midtown.
So if we could just talk a little bit about, since the concept here is homecoming, right? If you guys could just talk a little bit about where you're originally from, where you went off to, I'm sure you all were at big cities, and what brought you back to Detroit. Anyone can start.
I'll start.
Okay.
I grew up in Sterling Heights, and when I wanted to pursue my culinary career, I had to leave Detroit because there was nowhere to work. There's no restaurants to work at. So I went to culinary school in New York, Chicago, Italy, bounced around getting culinary jobs, always with the home base of Detroit because my family was here. My parents were here, my sisters were here, my whole family was here. And so I would come back for holidays and always with the mindset like, oh, maybe there's a good restaurant that I'll be able to work at and apply for a job. And then every time I would come home, there was never any good restaurants, unfortunately. So there's nowhere for me to work. So I had to find work in other markets for the last, in my last stint, I was in Washington, D.C. for 8 years. And every time I would come home, Detroit would just get a little bit better. And then I had to just make the decision, and I knew I wanted to open a restaurant, so I made the decision to find some investors and do it here. And that's the run of it, Homecoming, that's basically a homecoming. It's literally the entire thing.
My story, I grew up in Garden City, Michigan. We moved to Brighton, and I went to school in East Lansing. I grew up working in the car dealerships. My dad was a mechanic and eventually a service manager. So from the time I was 14, until I graduated college, I would work, summers and weekends, when we could at the car dealership. And I graduated college, and I kind of looked over one day and I said, if I don't get out of here, I'm going to end up being, in my dad's seat 20 years from now, having done the same thing for my entire life. And I saw an ad for the French Culinary Institute in New York City, and I moved to New York. Thought I'd be there a couple of years, learn how to cook, move back, open a restaurant. I was there for 15 years, where I had a lot of great opportunities. I opened and ran a restaurant called Maria, where we earned 2 Michelin stars, and I kept them for the 9 years that I was the chef there. Opened restaurants in Istanbul, Hong Kong, traveled the world, got to see a lot of things and do a lot of things and eat a lot of things, and all with the goal of coming back to Michigan and bringing that knowledge to to our guests, to our staff, in hopes that we can kind of continue the momentum of making Detroit more and more of a food destination.
So I'm actually originally from South Louisiana, born and raised, and I wanted to open a Creole restaurant here in Michigan. Since I wanted to start a restaurant, I figured it would be best if I learned how to actually run a business. So I went to school for business management, moved up here after college to work in the industry. I did follow a boy up here. That didn't work out. But I realized that I was here for a reason, and I may not know what that reason was yet. But worked in the industry for 20 years, managing, running, operating food service establishments. and realized that I could be a lot more impactful by helping other people open up their businesses, their food businesses, than having my own. And so that's where the consulting agency came in, worked with several nonprofits throughout the city to help food entrepreneurs start and grow their businesses.
So I joined my wife in 2015, November. We both come as a refugee from Burundi. At the time, she came before me in 2013, living in Freedom House, the only shelter in the United States that can give legal support, can give food and the roof for refugees and immigrants is right here in Detroit. That was the choice. That's why we came here. Tried to apply visa 2 times. I couldn't get it. So my wife at that time, she was pregnant. And I saw my kid for the first time, twins daughter now, they're almost 10. In 2015, they were 2 years old. And so start new life. I didn't speak, the language. Everything was new. November, the weather was cold. After 1 year staying home, I tried to get, a job. I couldn't get any job. And at that time, the job you could get was 1 hour from here. And I decided I want to, try to create my own job. So grew up, my mom owned a small restaurant. And I had my background in marketing. I was like, I can combine these two. And my wife, she's an amazing cook. So I was like, she can cook, I can sell. That's how everything started. But we didn't have a credit score. We were new in business. And the ecosystem in Detroit was there just to help us. And that is how we started. We started by one competition just still happening, Hash Detroit. We won $50,000 from that competition. That is how everything started.
So, like I said, for me, I'm from New York, lived in Chicago for a little bit, and these other, big cities. I also had a sort of a different trajectory. So I started my career as a beauty editor and only recently got into food in the past couple years. My husband is originally from here, and when we would visit his parents, I just felt like it was such an amazing city. I truly just fell in love with Detroit. I fell in love with the soul that's here. I just really felt like I had a draw to this city. Even coming, again, from these other cities that most people are like, wait, you left New York to go where? Why are you here? But I really do just love this place. I'm curious for you guys, again, having experience in other cities and now working in the restaurant industry here, how can you sort of compare your experience there to here, and are there any benefits of being here in Detroit?
Well, I think there's a lot of benefits to Detroit. First of all, Michigan, agriculturally, has a lot going on, a lot of really unique farms and really good proteins and a lot of vegetables. I think Detroit, where I came from DC, there was a lot of restaurants opening fast. It's a Michelin city. Rents are high. Things are competitive. Chefs are fighting for talent in a way that we're not seeing here. We're much more collaborative as a chef community here, where, when I was in DC, it was just a little bit more. My experience was poaching employees and unfriendly interactions with your people who are your peers, essentially. So, and it wasn't all like that, but for the most part in Detroit, we've kind of built something here, but we're all here for a reason. We all came to be part of what feels like a culinary renaissance. And so, speaking for a lot of the other chefs, not just Jared and these guys, but like other chef and restaurateurs that have come back and opened restaurants. And we don't feel like we're each other's competition. We feel like our competition is like Capital Grill or Eddie Merlot's or like a corporate shop. No, if someone is here from Eddie Merlot's, I no disrespect. But, like the corporate steakhouses or the corporate places that aren't putting their heart and soul into their craft like we are. That's our competition. We're not competition with each other.
And to piggyback what Chef Anthony said, one of the things that I've always said about Detroit, and particularly this food ecosystem and community here, is that there's this Southern hospitality here that you wouldn't think to find in Detroit. And maybe that's because of so much migration from the South, but it is here, it's present, it's not going anywhere. And I think that's what lends to this sense of collaborate, not even just this sense, but what we do here that's very collaborative. I talk to chefs across the country And they don't have this collaborative community like we do here in Detroit. And not just amongst ourselves and chefs and restaurants or restaurateurs, but among the whole food ecosystem, so your farmers and your local food makers. They don't see that in other cities like we do here in Detroit. And it's something that I guess I took for granted until I started talking to chefs from across the country when I did a collaborative dinner, and they were like, we don't do that. Like, I don't talk to chefs from across the country. Right. They were like, you'll see us together for a photo shoot, but we don't actually, spend time together and do things together. Yeah.
It's so interesting. I get that sense too, and I'm obviously, not cooking like you guys, but I get the sense that there really is this feel of community, and I can't compare it to other cities because I haven't been in the food scene, but I genuinely feel that even just camaraderie on this stage. You guys all know each other. I'm sure you've all worked together in some capacity, which is really awesome. Did anybody else want to add? Sorry, I just
so for me it was different because I was new in the industry. I was new in this country. I didn't have a family here. I didn't have anybody I can look at, and I'll go ask. This community was the one who helped me to be where am I, even to fix the price for the dishes. I related to different chefs. Remember my friend Dave Supino, I went there and said, this is my price. No, this is, you're not going to make money here. You have to raise this. I didn't know that. So that is someone who in the same block.
Right, you're right in the same neighborhood.
Yeah. So that's who's supposed to be my competitor. Right. And every time when I'm bringing something, like I remember when I came and to Anthony say, hey, I have this fundraiser for Freedom House, like, let's do that. That night we raised like 3,500,000 for the cause. So
35,000, not 3,500, 35,000.
Wow.
Yeah. So that is Detroit. Yeah.
That's great. Did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think that the ability to kind of impact more than, just what's in your four walls of the restaurant, to be able to reach out and do these things. And, in New York, it's a big city, there's a lot of people, the amount of money is just so much greater, and, to be able to operate one restaurant or, be the chef of one restaurant, you don't have as much pull, you can't do as much. You can be a small piece of a big, machine, but, here, a handful of us can make a real difference. We can create programs that can impact, students. We can bring in chefs that can, widen people's ability to, to see what's possible in this industry, to strive for and to, to reach for and create connections that they can then go to these other markets and, impact their lives in a meaningful way. That's kind of what I really enjoy about being here in Detroit.
Yeah. While we're sort of on the topic, and Anthony, you kind of even said soul, which is a word that really resonates with me when I think of Detroit. I really feel like there is a soul here. And my observation is that in the food industry, I feel like you guys all have your own passion projects. You all have these ambitions. You have these causes that really speak to you and that motivate you outside of the kitchen, in the kitchen. You guys are doing different things. I want you to speak to some of the things that you guys are working on outside of just your restaurants, or even maybe they're part of the restaurants that I think really speak to just Detroit has this sense of like heart. And anybody can start.
I can start that. I think Baobab have been doing a lot of things because coming here, we didn't like the food, and we wanted to change all those things. And then nobody knew about my country, Burundi. So we started importing coffee from Burundi and started roasting. And now we started bringing cacao, and we are making our own chocolates. So then we can not only make that connection to the continent, also to tell people who we are. There is no any cacao importer in the United States who's black, who is from Africa. So those were the things. And Freedom House was very, very important for us. They didn't have a kitchen. And then I brought all the chefs together. I said, hey, can we do something like this? I think those are the things that we are doing now. We are working on, we get a new kitchen, working and start making lunches for school, because everyone who has kids at school, they don't like food that they eat. So that is one thing. Can we just make lunches for schools and give them great desserts so they can enjoy what we're doing? And I know sometimes it's going to be hard for us, but those changes can happen.
Right, right. Really quick, just because I heard some snickers when you said we didn't like the food when we got here.
Yeah.
Can you tell a little bit of your story of like when you got here, you were at Freedom House? I don't know if everyone knows your story.
Yeah, so I came, as I say, me and Nadia came as a refugee and lived in Freedom House for almost 2 years. And, you know, starting new life in the United States. At that time, you can imagine Detroit has grown like very quick. There was no any around jobs. And, you know, we struggle as everybody, but the ecosystem and the community was there for us. And, you know, that's how we started the restaurant. And now we are doing well, so we're so grateful for that. So my story I can tell is
I know, it's a long one.
Yeah, but again, this is my story. Came as a refugee, didn't speak the language. It was my first time in the United States. I never traveled this far in my life. I never saw and think that I would be here today. And now Detroit is my home. This is where and then for me and Nadia, when you come living as a refugee is different from a choice to make a choice to move in another place. It was not a choice because for the first time, we're gonna go back this year after 10 years almost. So and then I'm sure 100% that is not home anymore. Home is here. So that is different being a refugee. You just forced to find another home. Yeah.
Right. Ederique, obviously you're a cook, but you have some other really interesting projects that you're working on.
Yeah, so I sit on the board of a nonprofit called Make Food Not Waste, which is a nonprofit that is dedicated, whose mission is to reduce the effects of climate change through reducing food waste. So we rescue food and then feed families that are facing food insecurity every day. Also sit on the board now with Chef Anthony of Detroit Food Academy, which is another really beautiful and important nonprofit. But when I really started to do some advocacy work these past few years and thinking about what is that one thing that is super important that I would go to my congresswoman about and advocate for, it was mental health, and particularly mental health in this industry. And fortunately, unfortunately, I'm one of those people that when I don't see something, I'm like, all right, I'll just do it myself. So I'm actually, I think this is the first time you're saying this publicly, but I am going to be going into a master's program in clinical health psychology.
Oh, congrats.
So I can be a therapist specifically for people in the restaurant industry.
Oh, wow, so that's great. Yeah,
good.
Yeah. Sharon?
For me, I, you know, like I said before, I've been very fortunate and traveled and seen and tasted a lot of things, and you know, I feel like my path is to pass this knowledge on to the younger generation. So, you know, last year we started a culinary collective where you know, we had some of the chefs from my past, you know, some award-winning Michelin-starred chefs come in and do a takeover of the restaurant for a couple of nights. We partnered with Henry Ford College and Schoolcraft Community College to bring students in to both eat and work and meet these chefs for each of these nights. You know, and all with the purpose of, like I said, bringing, you know, information, experiences, you know, new flavors, new palettes to, you know, to our local, our guests and our staff, so that they can learn and grow. And you know, in the process, we were also able to raise $10,000 for Forgotten Harvest, and you know, provide food to, you know, tens of thousands of local you know, people that are, you know, insecure. And you know, that's my passion. I like to be in a kitchen. I like to mentor. I want to pass this knowledge on so that we continue to have, you know, great food in this city, and it just gets better and better.
Yeah, and yeah, I think that's part of the goal for a lot of restaurateurs in the city is, like, if you're a young, talented kid and you're 17, 18, and you want to be a chef, maybe you don't have to leave. Or maybe you can leave for a couple of years, but you're going to want to come back to your city and not just completely leave. Maybe there's enough. If you work for me for 2 years, Jared for 2 years, Mamba for, you know, if you bounce around some of these Detroit spots, you're going to have what it takes to become a good operator and a good chef. So that's kind of where I think that's what a food scene really is. That's basically the basis of it. I remember when we first opened SheWolf, I would go around the dining room, talk to the customer. I would meet a guest from out of town. Like, hey, what are you doing in Detroit? They're like, oh, Detroit's, it's on our list. I'm like, on a list for what? What the fuck are you talking about? They're like, yeah, we travel, we go to city. Detroit was on our list. Like, couldn't get it. It wasn't sinking in. But Detroit is becoming a food destination.
Yeah.
And they're coming here, and we're getting a reputation around the country as a culinary hub. More so than especially more so than a lot of other Rust Belt kind of same size cities. Your Indianapolis's, your Cleveland's, your Columbus's. Detroit has a cool factor on all those, first of all. And then restaurant-wise, scene-wise, we're a step above them. So that's like our competition. We're not trying to compete with, in my mind, we're not trying to compete with New York or Chicago. But if you got a choice between Cleveland or Detroit, no disrespect to anybody from Cleveland.
I will say, though, I do think we can compete with bigger cities. As somebody who kind of travels around, I do think that our food is kind of on the same playing field as New York. I've been disappointed by some restaurants in New York these days, I will say, and that's where I'm from, so I shouldn't have said that. But
So I wanted to ask something what Anthony said. I feel like the competition here is try to find and solve our own problems that we have.
Yeah.
So you see a problem, you try to solve that problem. That is our competition.
Right.
So everyone sees something and we compete to be the first one to solve that problem.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a really great point. And that's something that I've said in the past where I feel like we don't have the Michelin Guide here, which is something that Jared and I were talking about recently, but we don't have the Michelin Guide here. We hadn't won a James Beard Award in like 30 years before, was that 2 years ago now? We really haven't had that, we haven't had that spotlight on Detroit's food scene here. And so really you guys have just been cooking for yourselves and for the community and just for the love of it, as opposed to striving for these accolades. Now the accolades are coming, which feels a little bit more organic. Jared, I don't know if we want to talk a little bit about Michelin Guide not being here. I don't know if folks even understand how it works, but I think that's something to touch on.
Yeah, so the Michelin Guide, for those of you who don't know, is a global, essential rating system for restaurants. And until recently, they only went to markets that were large, your Tokyos, New York, Chicago, San Francisco. But now, Michelin has opened their doors for a fee to come to different cities. So the way it works is, and there's a article in the New York Times a couple weeks ago because Denver, Boulder, Miami, Florida, there's some other cities that have recently ponied up, the visitors bureaus, generally, government funding, ponied up $600,000 to have Michelin come to their cities in hopes that it will bring tourism to there, because tourists spend more money than locals do. So, I kind of mentioned it to Lyndsay about, how can we create some of these, business, some of these government or large business, small business partnerships in order to bring more people to Detroit because, the work from home, the post-pandemic work from home is and continues to be an issue. Yeah. Weekday traffic is down. And it's hard to say, hey, let's keep reinvesting in Detroit, let's keep, expanding in Detroit when, you're doing it because, you need to diversify, you need to, add some more money because you're seeing a dip in this restaurant and, you were like, all right, maybe if I had another one, the two combined will get me back to where I want to be. So Michelin is an option now, it's on the table, but it requires, restaurants can't say, hey, let's all chip in and get Michelin to come. Restaurants aren't allowed to pay for this. So it's going to take, government, it's going to take talking to senators and mayors, and, it's going to take a louder voice, which our friend over here has, quite a loud voice. So I thought it'd be an interesting, discussion for us to have and to see where we can take it.
Yeah, I think it is a conversation worth having. The dollar amount that I saw on that is really wild. But yeah, something to think about.
Think it's a lot, 600,000?
Well, I mean, 1.5 million in Israel.
Really?
Yeah, and anyway, that's a whole nother story. But what I am excited to see is, again, we've got James Beard now, we've got, what else? Just this week, Ladder 4 in Southwest Detroit was one of the New York Times 50 best. Freya has been on New York Times, I think it's America's Best last year. You guys were on the list recently, last year.
Yeah, this year.
Yeah, this year. So it's exciting to see that people are paying attention.
Yeah.
I'm glad you mentioned that.
It's hard to get national attention on the restaurant scene here. The James Beard Foundation, in order to get a vote, you have to have a 1-1, right? So in order to, and the way that they factor that in, so that's why Chicago, we're in the same market as Chicago.
Right.
It's a major market. So maybe there's some better restaurants here than Chicago, but the voters aren't here. The voters are in Chicago, so they're voting for their hometown friends. So it doesn't make a lot of sense. But, you know, you just got to get what you can. We have the free press, you know. I was on the cover of the Italian American Tribune. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of that. Grocery stores and funeral homes mostly. They're free kind of at the door, but whatever, I'll take it, you know.
It's all good. It's all good. All right, I know we have to wrap up in a little bit, and I want to be able to take questions. Not sure the best way to do that. We were supposed to have a little iPad. I wonder if we can just, is there anybody? Okay. Okay, well, we have hands. If I can hear you, let's maybe do it that way.
So, I don't like the term expat, but I live in Washington, D.C., where Detroit is home and will always be. One thing we saw in the pandemic is that initially, D.C. put a lot of energy into downtown, then they started to move out and put energy in communities. And so the restaurants that are in communities have actually flourished better than the ones downtown, because when everybody went to work back at home, they went to the local restaurant in their community. I'm wondering, is that a conversation here in Detroit about putting restaurants in communities, since people do work at home a lot, and is that a strategy with some consideration?
I mean, I think, you know, like I said before, Detroit is, you know, the work from home thing is very much real. And, you know, unfortunately, the three of us before, and I don't want to say unfortunately because we're fortunate to be here, but, you know, I signed my lease before the pandemic happened. Anthony was already established. Mamba and I opened more or less, you know, weeks apart. So we kind of would sit in our dining rooms and, you know, commiserate on, you know, what's going to happen. And, you know, and I think, you know, for me personally, when I look at expansion, you know, it's to the suburbs. It's to these, you know, I live in Farmington Hills, you know, it's 20 minutes, you know, kind of northwest. And, you know, I go out on Tuesdays and Wednesdays, which are my days off, and, you know, restaurants are full. You know, I come into my restaurant, and granted, I have a much bigger restaurant, so full is, you know, a different, has a different meaning sometimes. But, you know, I think, you know, diversifying is going to be kind of something that we're all considering when we're looking at, you know, the next property, you know, where to go. You know, maybe it's a smaller property in a, you know, in a town like, you know, Northville or Novi or Berkeley or, you know, so that's kind of where my head is at as well, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But I'm talking about neighborhoods in Detroit.
So we have our second location. We are building our second location on East Warren and Cadron. That is in Detroit. And the reason is because if you see that area, there was not any restaurant for a long time. I think that is what's coming. The question is like, is a responsibility. At the same time, we have people in Grosse Pointe who can walk 6 minutes from there. But how can we empower those neighborhoods? Is that's the answer for us? It's like, again, there is a problem. How can we solve this problem? I think that strategy in place by staying in Detroit, empowering Detroit, at the same time looking at different audience.
Did anyone else have a question? Okay.
Hello, everybody. My name is Kayana Tate. And I just wanted to ask about myself. I know
me. This sounds right up my alley, particularly as it focuses on youth. Again, I used to work for Detroit Food Academy for 4 years, and then transitioned to being on the board. So the combined love for youth and talent and development, and then with mentoring and coaching people that want to start food businesses, I'll get your number right after, and we can definitely talk.
All right, do we have time for another question? Yeah, okay, anybody else? Anyone else?
I'll say one thing about the Detroit food scene. One thing we have that other markets don't have is like this massive immigration, like this immigrant community, so like Lebanese food, and that's one thing that I want when I go to when you go to another market, even New York City, where I was from in DC, there was no Middle Eastern food like how it is here. We have the largest Middle Eastern community, and that brings food, which thank you. And then like another thing about the like the grocery situation in all of Metro Detroit, we have, for some reason, we have the most independent grocers more than any other state. A lot of other states conglomerate. There's corporate Publix and the giants, and they buy up independent grocers, and that just doesn't happen in Michigan. And you have 10 to 15 companies that are 2 to 3 stores all throughout Metro Detroit. The Vince's and Joe's, the Nino Savaggios, the Plum Markets. These are grocers that work with food entrepreneurs to try to get Michigan food on their shelves. And it's just something you don't see in other markets, and it's unique. And then lastly, when I think about Detroit as a metro area in all the suburbs, Detroit City geographically is, for someone like myself, or like a chef that wants a platform, and we're creating fine dining meals. We're not necessarily a neighborhood restaurant. We're doing tasting menus and curated menus and using high-end ingredients. We want the largest platform. We want to cast the largest net. And Detroit geographically is the best, because if you go to Bloomfield or you go to the northern suburbs like Birmingham, you will be busy every night. But you won't get anybody from Grosse Pointe. They're not going to drive over. You won't get anybody from downriver. You won't get anybody from Detroit. And if you open up in Grosse Pointe, you're not going to get any Oakland County people. You're not going to get any downriver. Where in Detroit, you cast a wider net. You get those downriver audience. You get west side, east side. We have, at any night in SheWolf, you can count 5 to 6 tables from Canada, from Windsor. They shoot over. It's faster to get to SheWolf from Windsor than it is from West Bloomfield. So they shoot over the bridge. They got a Nexus pass. We got a lot of Canadians, and so geographically, Detroit is where from our point of view, from our skill, we want everybody. We want to cast that wide net, and that's all.
I think that's a good way to just like wrap this up. I love that you just shouted out 3 great things about being in Detroit. Does anybody else want to share what's amazing about being here in Detroit and Detroit's food scene that maybe we haven't touched on?
For me is I remember my sister came to visit from Dallas. She used to live in Lombardo, and she moved because her son was sick because of the weather. And she came back. She told me the only place that the American dream is still alive is here in Detroit, because of what was happening to us. It's like you can't find these chances anywhere else in this country. Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. 2 things. One, really love the robust small business ecosystem that we have here in Detroit. It's helped a lot of people, and Mamba alluded to it earlier with him winning Cash Detroit. It's something that you don't find in other cities where there's this much technical assistance to help people, start their businesses, grow their businesses, and really create their own path to economic mobility and wealth generation. And also, Detroit is home for me now. Like I said, it has that Southern hospitality that I compare to, from being from Louisiana, that I see it and it's beautiful. so much so that I've moved my mom and my sister and her kids up here. So my niece and nephews are Detroiters, and yeah, lifelong Detroiter now, so it's home.
I'd say the people on the stage and, you know, those that aren't on the stage kind of make up the attitude and the, you know, the positivity, the, you know, the drive to want to be a part of it.
Yeah.
And I'm happy to be a part of it.
Yeah. You already said yours. You got anything else?
I think the
He's
Lions
got
are
one.
going to probably win the division. That's about it.
I know for me, just in my own personal experience, I really don't think had I stayed in any other city, I'd be able to be a food editor or a food writer the way that I am now. I think it was a huge jump, and I'm just grateful to Detroit for welcoming me, embracing me, and having so much to write about. There's so much. There's a new restaurant every 5 minutes. There's a lot to talk about, and there's a lot that's exciting here. So I'm grateful. I'm glad we had this talk. This was so fun. Thank you guys for joining me. Thank you for having me. Everybody, I hope this was helpful for you, and I think we'll end it there.